to welcome all of you. That is the job of the esteemed personalities that will be sharing the floor. My name is Eduardo Capapello, and I have been collaborating with you via email for a number of months now. And while ideally it would have been best to have this competition in person in Geneva, unfortunately, the times make it so that we have to meet each other online. And with that, we have three very interesting and exciting individuals who would like to wish you not only welcome, but also good luck. And the first of those individuals will be Ambassador Khan, who also serves as the president of the Human Rights Council. Then we'll have the Secretary General of the Commonwealth of States, Commonwealth countries. And finally, Professor Veronica Gomez of the Global Campus of Human Rights. Unfortunately, the President of the Human Rights Council and the Secretary General of the Commonwealth had to pre-record their addresses to you this afternoon because of clashing schedules. And as you know, the Human Rights Council is currently in session. And so we will have to hear her welcome, that of the President of the Council, via pre-recorded video. And so without any further ado, I present to you Ambassador Khan.
Excellencies, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, Bula Vinaka, it is my great honor to welcome all of you to the 13th Nelson Mandela World Human Rights Moot Court competition. By way of introduction, my name is Nazhat Shameem Khan, and I serve as the ambassador of the Republic of Fiji to the United Nations in Geneva. I also have the honor to serve as the president of the United Nations Human Rights Council for the year 2021. At the outset, I wish to express my deepest condolences to the family, friends, and colleagues of Professor Christoph Heyns. Professor Heyns was a prominent defender of human rights, engaging extensively with the Human Rights Council and international human rights mechanisms, as well as a driving force behind this moot court competition. He is an inspiration to us all to continue our work to make the world a better place. In this spirit, I would like to thank the organizers of the 13th Nelson Mandela World Human Rights Moot Court competition, the Center for Human Rights of the University of Pretoria, the Academy of Human Rights and Humanitarian Law at American University's Washington College of Law, and the Human Rights Council branch at the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. And of course, I want to thank all the participants, each of you, a student and future lawyer, for taking part in this important competition. This is a great opportunity to sharpen your lawyering skills, immerse yourself in substantive human rights issues, and interact with human rights experts. Indeed, in my previous position as a High Court judge in Fiji, I saw firsthand the importance of carefully crafted arguments and clear, concise oral presentations. And I can confidently say that this moot court competition will serve as an important professional development experience and make you more effective advocates. Excellencies, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, if I may, I would like to highlight one more way in which this World Human Rights Moot Court competition is a great opportunity. You, the participants, have come together from across the globe, from societies with different cultures, different legal systems, and different political systems. As such, each and every one of you have much to teach to and to learn from one another. I encourage you to listen carefully to one another and to think through the perspectives of your co-participants. Indeed, in my current role as president of the Human Rights Council, and in my former role as High Court judge, I have learned the most about the law and human rights when I have engaged with diverse perspectives, and especially those perspectives that differ from my own. Excellencies, esteemed participants, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by honoring the man after whom this moot court competition is named, Nelson Mandela. The event importantly recognizes one of the greatest and most emblematic figures in history. Nelson Mandela, a lawyer by profession, committed his life to achieving racial equality and promoting and protecting the human rights of all. He made significant sacrifices in pursuit of these noble goals for us all. But Nelson Mandela is not just a source of inspiration. His memory is also a call to action. Indeed, his memory calls on all of us to dedicate ourselves to promoting and protecting the human rights of all persons. The World Human Rights Moot Court Competition is answering this call to action. This event trains the lawyers and human rights defenders of the future in the skills they need to stand up and defend human rights for all. So I would once again like to recognize the organizers for helping to foster in a new generation the skills necessary to meet Nelson Mandela's call to action.
But we now move on to the peer-to-peer discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Michael Wiener and Mr. Ibrahim Salama, who are both at the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And I believe that it would be quite worthwhile for you to listen in and also engage with Michael and Ibrahim, especially as some of the discussions that will take place to a certain extent, rather to a large extent, also influence or have bearing on the hypothetical case. And so with that, Michael, I'm going to turn over to you and Ibrahim, and please take us through.
You have to unmute yourself, sorry, Ibrahim.
Thank you very much, Eduardo, and I'm grateful to Frans, and I would start by quoting him when he said that Christopher Hines was expansive in his thinking and in his approach to life. On many areas, because my area of responsibility in the Office of the High Commissioner is basically the treaties, and he was a member of the Human Rights Committee. And one of his legacies is that this expansive nature of the thinking that makes him so visionary that a project on the impact of the treaty body outcomes on states' legislations started more than 20 years ago. And 2 publications were done to compare notes on the same 23 countries to try to see the trajectory. And this is a missing element in the human rights thinking. La durée, the trajectory, the time factor. Under the impulse of advocacy, people at times forget that time needs time. And this is something that has always been in Christopher's minds. And up till now, and this is one of the main fruits of strategic thinking, we in the Office of the High Commissioner are embarking on working on how to transform his project on the study of impact on treaty bodies into something much longer term, something much more structured that becomes a permanent feature of the human rights work. The empirical evidence, the missing causalities, all these are seeds that Christoph Hines planted. But he also planted the seeds of faithful rights. I mean, here comes my transition. And I would refer you to the fact that what we are trying to do here as a peer-to-peer learning demonstration is something that was born with him. And I will refer you, Michael can give the reference more clearly, and it's in the toolkit on faithful rights, that the very first peer-to-peer debate on the toolkit on the faithful rights approach was a discussion that Michael moderated between Christoph and myself at the occasion of the last year's court. So what a beautiful continuity, what a powerful demonstration of the strength of ideas when they are deeply rooted in thinking that is both sincere and smart. All of this to tell you that Christoph Hines, as one of the founders and the authors of the Faithful Rights Framework, was struggling with us, and we're still going into the same intellectual and practical démarche of trying to see how is it that religion and human rights can define their tension zones, try to manage them, not to deny them, and on the other hand, rediscover the areas of mutual reinforcement. And this was an area that not too many people dared to venture in, precisely because religion is associated in a quasi-automatically dogmatic way with relativism and with limitation on rights. Yes, there are manipulations of religion that lead to this, but this is not religion. And the proof was exactly a personal story in Christoph Hines' family. I keep coming back to Christoph Hines. I don't mean it. It so happens it's the trajectory of realities and facts. It's a story about his father's fights against racism in South Africa and segregations, where he used the power of Christianity and dared to say things that go against the mainstream at that time. And that was his father. And then his son found these documents accidentally, and he was a filmmaker. So the young grandson made a film about his grandfather, about faithful rights, before it was even born. All this to say that religion can be a power of destruction if it's manipulated, and can be a huge deepening boost for human dignity, far beyond what people expect. One of the ideas that necessitated the faithful rights framework, and that again I used to share and discuss enormously with Christoph Hein in long walks along the lake in Geneva, where he used to live just next to the Palais Wilson. So we used to have a long walk after the sessions, trying to exchange notes on these things. One of the main ideas that he was implementing is that human rights is a site of permanent construction and reconstruction. And this is, again, not within the orthodoxy of human rights, because decomposing and recomposing is something that requires critical thinking. And at times people associate critical thinking in human rights area with relativism. Again, a major mistake, because there is a thin line between defending human rights and being dogmatic about them. And if human rights do not adapt to the new challenges, they do not guarantee the progressive development of the norms. The very fact that, as Frans reminded us, that he invented, conceived, and shaped your gathering, it's about this, because what I find fascinating in all your diversity is what unites you, which is being youth, i.e. the future. So it's your regard on human rights at present that can create the progressive development, and that this permanent site of construction and reconstruction is heading in the right direction. So trying to bring the factor and actor of religion into human rights was not an easy endeavor. And that's why we, in the Office of the High Commissioner, we didn't invent it. We just created the space where it developed. And it's people like Christoph and almost 250 experts of the same kind, of the same interdisciplinary thinking and courageous minds, who started to put this articulation of the human rights responsibilities of faith actors. So in a way, the Faithful Rights Framework gives life to the freedom of religion, which was an isolated right against the mantra of the Vienna Declaration and Program of Action, which is the interdependence, complementarity, and equal emphasis, but realities are different than these dogmas. So if Faithful Rights Framework gives life to FORB, it's discussions like yours and trying to use the Faithful Rights Framework in litigation, even on a simulation basis, that gives life to the faithful rights itself. All this to tell you that our main aim, Michael and myself, in this prototype of moderating is to ask ourselves the question, how can one present and conduct a discussion on such complex issues? What is it that is requested? We have had some experiences in this respect, but maybe I will hand over to Michael to speak about what we learned so far, and then from there start implementing this on the case study that we have selected, just to as a demonstration of how difficult it is to facilitate such an interdisciplinary discussion between two categories of actors who have so much in common and so much in competition, and who are like ships passing in the night, do not see each other, and when they see each other, it's not always a pleasure of meeting each other. Michael.
Many thanks. And as Ibrahim mentioned, we just put into the chat box the hyperlink to the Faithful Rights Toolkit, and precisely to the page number 25, where the exchange and also the personal history of Christoph and his father and his son is reflected. And it's actually one of the peer-to-peer learning exercises in the context of the Faithful Rights Framework. And so as Ibrahim was mentioning, we wanted to test something also together with you. And it will be the first time that we are trying this online, because previously we have been piloting the toolkit in itself and tested mainly online the different exercises. But today with you, what we want to try to also see how to facilitate the facilitation, meaning usually you need to have one person or several persons even ideally, who animate, who facilitate a discussion. We don't like the term moderate because moderation sounds very downplaying and making the result moderate. So we prefer the terminology facilitate. And perhaps you also may be interested in your personal or professional context to use this methodology of the Faithful Rights Toolkit. So obviously we cannot use the Nelson Mandela 2021 Moot Court case as an example, even though there is a reference. If you have, and I'm sure you noticed it, there's a specific reference even to the Faithful Rights Toolkit itself. But to be fair, we shouldn't go into this year's case because that's only coming up now. But what we thought of looking into is to have another hypothetical case, relatively short, and I'm just putting again the hyperlink to the invite that you may have received and seen anyway already. And this is a hypothetical case inspired obviously by many practical and real life examples of discrimination in the COVID-19 context. But this hypothetical case is basically putting together legal issues when it comes to how states and religious leaders and communities deal with pandemics or an epidemic. So if you don't mind, I mean, you can either switch on your camera. If you don't feel comfortable, you can also leave it closed. But what we really would like to try with as many participants as possible to really have an interactive discussion on it. And I'm not sure if everyone has read already the case. I suspect that not everyone has done so. So what I would suggest also to give you some time, because ideally it will be an interactive peer-to-peer learning exercise. So you have the opportunity now to listen to the case, which will be just 3-4 minutes. I will just read it. But then I would suggest that we try to see and brainstorm together how to actually discuss such a case study in a specific peer-to-peer learning context, in a community setting, in a place of worship, or in your law clinic, or just over the weekend. So without further ado, I will read the hypothetical case on the epidemic, and then we'll try to perhaps together see how to facilitate the facilitator's task. And if you want to read also the case at the same time, it's at the link that I put in the comment box. So the case goes as follows. Independent media in the state of Epidemic report about a new infectious virus called Anorok 20, which allegedly originated from the poor neighboring country Mulam and is now spreading within and beyond both states. The severe consequences of the disease have created a mass panic, since the virus leads to the death of around 20% of those infected, but is difficult to detect due an incubation period of 20 days. A vaccination against Anorok 20 is not yet fully tested, but will be rolled out shortly in Epidemic. The leader of A religion, which has around 10,000 followers, both in Mulam and Epidemic, has been criticized for his lack of transparency in dealing with the virus. During an international pilgrimage by 500 followers of A religion, who performed ritual washing ceremonies in the border river, the virus Anorok 20 was reportedly brought to Epidemic. For fear of repercussions, the leader of A religion did initially not want to disclose any information on attendees, citing their right to privacy, and also refused to be tested himself concerning a possible infection with Anorok 20. He also claimed that believing in A religion would protect against getting infected, and he strongly opposed cremation and any vaccination because the latter would alter the body's blood system, which is considered sacred by the Holy Scripture of A religion. After receiving some threats via social media, however, he agreed to be tested for Anuroc 20, which turned out to be negative. The Prime Minister of Ethnicony has ordered the closure of his country's borders to Mullam, while nationals of Ethnicony are still allowed to return home if they self-quarantine for 3 weeks. However, followers of a religion are held in closed mandatory confinement centers, even if they want and can go back to Mullam. The Prime Minister's emergency order also declared that, in view of obvious public health and safety concerns, it is compulsory that all followers of a religion are treated with a new vaccination against Anuroc 20. It also imposed cremation as the only option for handling the bodies confirmed or suspected of Anuroc 20. The leader of B religion, which constitutes the vast majority of Ethnicony's religious demography, stated in an interview broadcast by the public, I have to go back to the page, my mistake. So the leader of B religion stated in an interview broadcast by the public television that all members of the shameful A sect should either go back where they belong to or be imprisoned if these insects dare to remain in Ethnicony. Furthermore, he claimed without any further proof that the transmission of the virus during the international pilgrimage of a religion had happened due to a funeral service where all followers allegedly kissed the coffin of a deceased person. The followers of a religion who publicly wear the insignia of their religion, a small necklace with an A, are being verbally harassed and even physically attacked in Ethnicony without intervention by the police. So that is the hypothetical case, and you may have realized some parallels or some differences to COVID-19. And then the two questions that are suggested for this peer-to-peer learning is, one, what are the reprehensible acts and statements by the leaders of A religion and B religion? So that's the religious leader side. And secondly, how does the order of the Prime Minister of Ethnicony violate international human rights law? So that's the state side. So now I need someone as an icebreaker who can either share any feedback, any ideas, any spontaneous thoughts on this, and ideally even to see how to basically facilitate a discussion. And if no one from you helps me, I will have to put out someone point to someone of you. So you can either raise the hand and then we can go via that order, or you can even just take the floor. And then ideally, it's always nice to also put a face to a name. So if you want to, it's obviously very nice and great to also see your video.
Well, hello everyone. My name is Facundo Cecin. She's Julieta Levin. We are sharing the Zoom now because we can be together here. And just to start, clearly what is reprehensible about the acts and statements of the leader of a religion is related to affirming without any hesitation the actions that their followers should take with regards to the virus. And the reality is that being such an influential person within a society is really dangerous to just affirm without being a scientist and without knowing exactly which are the consequences of the virus, to make such a statement of that will clearly put in danger the health of the people, of the followers of the religion, being such an influential person, and the responsibility that this person and this influential person have on the media, both religious or even politicians. And as to the B religion, clearly this can be considered hate speech because it incites to hate, it incites to violence, and can have consequences on on the followers of the A religion and clearly spread a message of hate, of discrimination, and as such is reprehensible. And as the orders of the Prime Minister, just to start, we consider that they are clearly discriminatory. They are direct discrimination. They are not even indirect discrimination. That's not a measure that can be presumably neutral and have negative effects on a group. It's clearly direct discrimination. And that's what we consider that constitutes a violation of international human rights. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. That's wonderful. Not only as an icebreaker, but very substantive, and then going on and really addressing the core points of the three responsibilities, so to say. Just picking up on the first question about the responsibility of the leader of a religion. You mentioned about the claim also about that believing in a religion would actually protect you against being infected. So that is obviously a very harmful and problematic statement. What about his opposition to vaccinations and to actually being cremated? Do you also see this as problematic, or is that different?
Well, vaccination is quite a debate that we will actually have on the competition, perhaps. But we understand that in certain cases, you can oppose vaccination. You need, in any medical treatment, you need the consent of the person, and being the vaccination a medical treatment, we personally consider that it can be, consent might be needed, but the reality is that in certain cases, compulsory treatments have been accepted. Well, there are many vaccines that are compulsory, perhaps, I don't know, chickenpox, but it is quite controversial. And with regards to cremation, well, in that case, I consider that the will of the person should be respected, and that there can be measures in order to guarantee that a cremation is not compulsory and that people can be actually buried. We have seen around the world that people with COVID are being buried, and that yes, they may not be able to say goodbye, and they may not be able to kiss the person or to see even the corpse. But we consider that there can be certain guarantees established to guarantee a proper burial and to respect the right in that sense, if it's related to even the religion of the persons, independently of the will of the person that is living, whether it shares or it does not the religion. I hope I have made myself clear.
Thanks a lot, and that's really to the point. And also on the cremation, obviously this is inspired by the real life discussion, and also what has been picked up by several special rapporteurs in communications and also in a press release of January this year to Sri Lanka. And the problem there is obviously if it's pinpointing to some specific, usually religious or belief minorities, in that case Muslims. And then it has then also not only the discriminatory impact, but may even go further to hate speech and violence in real life. So I don't want to suppress anyone else taking the floor. So I'm just looking around if there's any hand or anyone wishing to speak. I need a second icebreaker. And in terms of gender parity, we need obviously a woman to take the floor also.
Maybe to facilitate it by complicating it, let's imagine that these very valid answers are given in a context of community of believers who do believe that vaccination is an alteration to God's creature. And they deeply believe in that. And they take it that compulsory vaccination is a violation of their freedom of religion. How is it that could one engage with them? You cannot simply tell them that human rights law says this and that. How to diversify the approach? Because this is at the heart of addressing communities who do not have a common narrative and try to forge this common narrative. How would you sell what you said, basically, and the question is open to anybody, to people who religiously believe that cremation is a must and that vaccination is a sin?
I see Alicia has her hand up, please.
Hi, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thanks.
Wonderful. I unfortunately can't be in the same room as my partner because we are experiencing a lockdown as a result of the COVID measures. And so this situation is probably quite apt for us to discuss. And quite aside from what my peers said, which I would agree with personally, I thought it would be interesting to engage on the other side for the sake of discussion. And I think one of the hardest things about being a facilitator of a discussion like this is to acknowledge that everyone's beliefs come or stem from a certain place, and they come from respect and value for certain principles. And so in terms of engaging with people who believe differently, I think at the core of all beliefs are certain fundamental values, perhaps for the sanctity of maybe life, or the sanctity of family, or the sanctity of something else. And I think delving into those principles rather than the way they manifest in policy opposition helps perhaps distill some areas of agreement, even though there might still be disagreement. And I think the other thing, of course, to acknowledge is that the 11th, I think, one of the Faith for Rights toolkit was about critical opposition. And I think it's very dangerous for any society to have only one view, or to profess that view is the sole view, because we can never truly know, without the benefit of hindsight, what might be the right view. And so to encourage opposition, even where it's frustrating, I think is a worthwhile endeavor. But it is 2 a.m. here, so that's my 2 cents worth.
Alicia, for a 2 a.m. thought, that's really brilliant. I'll tell you why. Simply what you're saying is that you can take anybody's belief as absolute as they are for him or her, but then for the same reason, they should be able to agree with you as a facilitator that this they cannot impose it to others. So at least loosen the dogmatism that comes with many religious perceptions would be possible. And this is a starting point for critical thinking. Just admitting at the outset, and this is a tip for the facilitators that you came up with, that's fine. Don't try to change anybody's deeply entrenched religious beliefs, but at least beg him or her to accept that others may think differently. And this will create a space of reconciliation, because many religious people not only so deeply believe in what they believe in as sacred, but they believe that others should believe the same. And here comes the oppression in the name of religion. And starting by diffusing this, by getting it out of the way, makes any people with religious belief much more amenable to listen to other views. So I think that's a great reflection, Michael, for how to start a discussion in a polarized, dogmatic, religious-based community of that kind.
Absolutely, and you really got to the heart of the matter of all these problems, and for sure of the Faith for Rights Toolkit, which goes to the interpretation of religious texts, which by definition is a human interpretation. So there's always scope for interpreting. And in that sense, I think that's precisely the perfect entry point. And then the other valid point that you, Alicia, made is really going to and taking as a point of departure the religious tenets themselves. And going back to the hypothetical case, you have really also the tenet that the blood system is considered sacred by this hypothetical religion A, and this obviously is modeled after also several religions, notably Jehovah's Witnesses. And perhaps you may have also read in McEvan's or a book, The Children's Act, or there was also a movie recently, which is very impressive in the way it shows the dilemma of the personal and the societal context, also for the judges also, or the state institutions involved. So I think that's another point that we have witnessed ourselves. It's important to, first go and genuinely try to understand where the participants are coming from, but then also to know about precedents like the Jehovah's Witnesses case, which you can then also explain and share as a concrete example. I have got one question coming in French, so obviously we can also accept that question in French, and then I can also try to translate into English afterwards. And then we have afterwards also a hand by Bavia. But first, Tsahiro, please. Alors maintenant, tu peux poser ta question en français si tu veux, et moi je pourrais le traduire après en anglais.
Alors, bonsoir messieurs, dames, je vous prie de recevoir mes salutations distinguées. Merci beaucoup pour l'honneur que vous nous faites de nous prononcer dans cette grande conférence qui marque le début de cette grande compétition d'envergure mondiale. En vos rangs, grades et qualités, je vous transmets l'honneur, gratitude ainsi que mes reconnaissances et révérences. Merci, professeur. En effet, au sujet de ce concours, de cette compétition, cette année, il y a, à cause de Covid-19, nous sommes tous impactés et donc il n'y a pas la possibilité de faire le déplacement. Cependant, au niveau de l'équipe française, la seule équipe d'ailleurs à être retenue, et nous constatons bien avec ce qui nous a été communiqué que nous ne pouvons pas aller jusqu'à la fin du concours compte tenu de notre sens unique de candidature. Donc, raison pour laquelle est-ce que nous vous demandons une clémence, est-ce que cela ne peut pas être revu sur cette position? Merci.
So just in a nutshell, to translate into English, Tsahiro is obviously coming from a French-speaking team, and unfortunately, it was, I think, I understand it's the only team participating in French. So he's asking, also in view of the lack of possibility to travel due to COVID-19, and he's asking, and there I'm perhaps also transmitting that question to Eduardo and the team at the Center for Human Rights in Pretoria, if there's not any possibility to look again into basically the lack of possibility of participating for this French-speaking team. So perhaps, Eduardo, you can also have a look and talk internally if there's anything which still could be done. I see another hand from Bavia.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, thanks.
Hi. So this is, I think just picking up from like where I think you left when you said about like the conflict between understanding religion and how it fits in the community. I think that's something that I've constantly like, at least even in this case, and I think it's a very unique situation that COVID sort of presents, because here the actions of a particular religious group are not just limited to how it affects them, but is also having large repercussions in the society. And like I so to draw parallel to like what Jehovah's Witness had was a largely more individualistic aspect to it. So to like my question, it's more of a question than like to sort of give an answer, but is understanding how religion, which is to the core, it seems like a community, but is also very individualistic aspect, fits into like a utilitarian situation of a COVID, of COVID, right? Like where maybe like an individual's religion does not allow them to take a vaccine, but for the like larger, greater good, it is necessary. So trying to understand just where religion fits in this utilitarian framework of of a pandemic in like COVID-19, just sort of, I just wanted to like ask everyone about that.
Many thanks, Bhavya, for again raising this very question to the point. And it's really showing the tensions between the individualistic approach, the collective approach within your community, but then also with society at large. And as the pandemic has shown, not even the society in your home country, but even globally. So you have quite a lot of stakeholders involved, and bringing all of them together and trying to reconcile each individual and collective right with everyone's rights and interests. That's really the challenge. But I think, again, also a good opportunity to discuss and to really try to see and to calibrate it together. So that's precisely the beauty of a peer-to-peer learning, where actually everyone is prone to learn and to take away important points. Ibrahim, do you want to add on anything?
I think on that particular point raised by you, Bhavya, which is the dichotomy between the individual dimension of religion and the institutional weight behind it. This is precisely why one of the main, I hesitate to say revolutionary because the word frightens, although it is in essence, that one of the main commitments among the 18 Faithful Rights Commitment is encouraging critical thinking within the religious sphere and from within the tools of the religious spheres. So to apply this, if any of us is a facilitator for this particular case and is confronted with the argument that vaccination is sinful because it alters God's essence of life, a simple question instead of opposing is to say, where is this coming from? Where is the source in your belief that says it? And you really ask it genuinely, because not only as a sign of respect, but to try to understand where the argument is coming from. And you will end up in the majority of cases, like Michael just mentioned, you will fall on the distinction between the religious dogma and its human interpretation. And it will boil down in each and every faith tradition to the fact that there are very limited number of core values which are divine, whatever definition you give to the divinity, in the sense of sacredness and supremacy of these values are much more limited as opposed to the surrounding heritage of interpretation, practice, customs, and human added values into this. So once you start this, you have you're trying to change from within. But this requires, from a facilitator's point of view, a minimum level of knowledge about religion. If you are coming from the human rights field, you need a minimum knowledge about religion. And if you are coming from the religious sphere and you want to challenge a human rights standard on your religious ground, it's perfectly equally legitimate. But then you also need a minimum of knowledge about human rights. That's why you see me and Michael doing it, because you need to be two in a debate like this, and preferably At least one of the two have more emphasis and knowledge on the religious sphere, and the other has more on the other. And that's the beauty of it. What we're trying to achieve through the peer-to-peer learning is to optimize what's common and manage what is diverging. But you need to accept the divergence. And to accept it, you need to understand it. If your intentions from facilitating a discussion among people of different faith traditions and with people who are not believers at all and believe that human rights are the only compelling standards for living together in society, you need to be able to exchange from within their respective disciplines, not just judging them from outside. And this brings me to the reflection that maybe, paradoxically, people of faith and human rights people have something, a weakness in common, which is preaching in the religious sphere, which is top down, and advocacy in the human rights sphere, which is push, push, push in that direction. In both cases, you don't really deeply, genuinely want to listen to the other. You think you know what is right, and you try to preach it if you're a religious actor, or to advocate it if you're a human rights actor. But the humbleness of listening to the other is at the heart of the peer-to-peer learning. And for this to happen, as you just mentioned, you need to discuss it from within. Not too many people dare to go that far. And it's not easy, but we try to facilitate it in the Office of the High Commissioner by trying to produce a framework which has its built-in safety valves in terms of what is the minimum threshold that a debate cannot go below. I don't know if this makes sense, but it's a perfect case to take the case and to say, why is vaccination sinful? Where is this coming from? Is it because life is sacked? Yes. If life is sacked and we have a chance to protect it, how can be the vaccine sinful if it protects the sanctity? Blood is what? It's the vehicle of energy into life. So what about life itself? Isn't it more sacred than the blood, which just makes it run? I mean, this type of argumentation, it needs to be built on an equal footing. You cannot, the only thing that you cannot do on a peer-to-peer mode is to project and to dump on somebody an absolute truth. The whole idea is to relativize. And this is why when we started, we never started piloting it with religious institutions as such, because it's more hierarchical in a way. And it is about encouraging the individual regard, the individual look at the system of beliefs and values. Everybody can be right and everybody can be wrong. And nobody is always right nor always wrong. Back to you, Mike.
I see that there are two more hands recently. One was from Team 10 and the second one from Marco. So let's start with Team 10 first.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, my name is Pasco and I'm appearing here for Team 10, based here in East Africa, Uganda, Kampala. Fellow facilitators, thank you so much for this theme, for the hypothetical for us. It's very interesting on peer learning and matters of faith and matters of faith and religion. Very interesting in the sense that in comparison with what is happening globally in this scourge of the pandemic, I think to find the case is so relevant in such a way that it brings the reality of what is happening in matters of faith. To my opinion and my observation, COVID-19 and what we see exactly portrayed in the case before us right now has posed a lot of challenge on matters of faith. There are many questions right now that people are asking in their religious faith, and the religious leaders can't have answers. Religious leaders themselves have succumbed to it, as the Salam put it very clearly. It becomes hard now to convince somebody that your faith right and is an answer to the problems of the world today. Very challenging. It becomes convincing somebody is evil when religion has not addressed the problems and the needs of the day at hand. Right now, where I'm based in, we are in a lockdown, the second phase of lockdown. People are no longer going to churches, are no longer having interface with the religious leaders for counseling and or spiritual guidance in one or the other. So it remains a challenge to the globe. It remains a challenge to to face at the moment. And at the end of it all, it is going to be hard to convince people to wholesomely embrace faith. As one of the facilitators put it, it should be now a one-on-one respect for one another, accept and believe what the other ones are saying. The critical thinking that is at some point not accepted in some religious circles has to come in. Because at the moment, as I said, the religious leaders have no critical answers, have no strategic answers to the problems of the globe today. So as is put in the hypothetical case, most of the religious leaders in Group A and Group A, they are really reprehensible for their statements. Of course, coming back to the statements of the Prime Minister, it poses the normal challenge of the absolute freedom of movement. Yes, you're free to move, but you're causing sickness to people, which at some point or the other, it becomes reasonable, it becomes necessary, it can be justified. Vaccination, as one of the peers mentioned a few minutes ago, it is consent. You can't force me to go for vaccination. It is my right. But on the other hand, the state has an obligation to protect its citizens. So it is a controversy. It is a big challenge, which I think as the globe, as the world community, and as a team of human rights activists, academicians, and thinkers should come together and have a common ground. And I think in the near future, because COVID-19 has posed a challenge, issues of human rights from all aspects of life. It has caused a challenge, so meaning that calls for realignment, rethinking about the rights of humanity. In the interest of time, I thank you for this. It's great to look forward to participating in the upcoming preliminary rounds, and it will be very wonderful. I thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And just also, it reminded me also of when you were referring to the specific role of religious leaders, the other kind of inspiration in a very negative sense, obviously, in the hypothetical case is when the religious leader of the B religion then does the hate speech against, or it's even blunt incitement to violence, when he refers to the A religion as a sect, and that these insects should basically go back where they belong to. Does this ring a bell, or do you have any similar statement which ultimately then even triggered a genocide? If you mean what if you understand what I mean, which would be the Rwanda example and the Radio Mille Collines case. I have another hand from Marco. So over to you, Marco, please.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. First of all, I apologize for not turning on my camera, but my connection is kind of not working that great. So with my team, we have this question that by the record, we can understand that there is a mandatory vaccination in the country. But we were wondering if we have to understand that if this mandatory vaccination has already begun in the country, like, is there people already vaccinated by the Moot in Rakata, or how do we have to understand this specific topic?
So you're referring to the Mandela Moot Court case, if I understand correctly, or the hypothetical case of faithful rights?
Yeah, about the Mandela Moot Court.
I mean, for that, I would have to divert the question to Eduardo. And I mean, if there's any precision required, I guess it would also need to transmit it to everyone and not only to those participating now. But perhaps Eduardo, you can check now and come back later, or you can even respond now, whatever your preference is.
Yes, certainly. I think, for that question, that is something that you'll have to do deeper research yourself. I think at this particular session is one which it will be a very broad overview on the links with the case, but not necessarily dealing with the aspects of the case. I hope that helped you a bit.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
And just going back to the Faith for Rights case, there obviously you also have the link to the compulsory vaccination. But there, if you go into the hypothetical case, it's only made compulsory for the followers of a religion. And on top of that, the case says it's not yet fully tested, but will be rolled out shortly. So in that sense, the minority of a religion is also being used as a guinea pig to see if there are any negative side effects before the majority of the B religion can be treated. I have another hand from Sanjana. Please, over to you.
Hi, I hope I'm audible enough. So just from the conversation that's been going on, I've had a couple of thoughts that I thought I'd share. The first is where you left off, that is, this compulsory vaccination is for a religion and that they're being used as guinea pigs of some sort to check for side effects. So the first question or thought that I had was with regards to the medical evidence available on a particular vaccine as such, and the potential side effects that it may have, or how it may threaten people's right to health under the disguise of it being protective or a protective measure. And considering it's a new virus, much akin to COVID-19, and there's very little research about the virus itself as well as the vaccine. So I was thinking what the implications of that would be to test this vaccine through compulsory vaccination as opposed to a recommendations-based system, which would probably have a less intrusive impact on, let's say, the right to privacy. So yeah, my first question was in regards to the nature of compulsory vaccination when there is very little medical evidence to show its relevance. Also considering the fact that human rights courts in the past have decided on compulsory vaccination regarding diseases that have been present for a really long period of time. And, they've considered a lot of medical evidence and empirical evidence in making their decisions, which is clearly not present in the hypothetical that has been presented, the Faith for Rights hypothetical, or even with regards to COVID-19. And the second thought that I kind of had was, while we talk about people's religion or people's beliefs and protecting these beliefs, my question was, how far can we exercise these beliefs when our way of exercising it is sort of threatening the lives of other people? So there are actually third parties who will probably contract this disease as a result of people's beliefs of not taking the vaccine or not following, let's say, cremation guidelines, for example. So the balancing of individual rights versus societal interests. Yeah.
Absolutely. You put your finger on really the core problems of this hypothetical case. And on your last point about possible limitations to freedom of religion or belief, and also to other right to privacy and so on, I think that is also fundamental here to distinguish also between the inner beliefs, so the forum internum, as it's called in the legal doctrine. So what you believe in, the right to have and to adopt and change a religion, so that the state cannot interfere with, both under freedom of religion or belief and under freedom of opinion and expression. However, once you manifest your religion or belief in the outside world, so the forum externum, or once you express your opinion to someone else, then the state can, and in some circumstances even must, interfere. So if you are, as you rightly mentioned, if you are impinging on fundamental rights and freedoms and human rights of others through your statement or through your manifestation, then the state can interfere and then limit under the specific limitation clauses conditions. And when it comes even to incitement to hatred or violence, then there's even under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 20, a mandatory requirement for the state to actually prevent that, that harm. So I think here, this distinction is very important for you as an applicant or respondent, and as a lawyer or as a human rights defender, really to always bear in mind. And that's also precisely the rationale in the hypothetical case to tease out these differences. So if someone believes in something that may sound weird or not compelling to everyone, this may still be his or her right. And the manifestation of this may be legitimately limited. And if it's a pandemic situation, for example, the case for protecting fundamental freedoms, right to life and other human rights of others and of the society at large may be compelling, but it always needs to be looked into on a case-by-case basis. So I think that's in a nutshell what you explained is really going to the fundamentals of international human rights law. Do I have any, Ibrahim, do you want to add anything? You have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute.
Just a very quick parallel between what you, Sanjana, called the balancing act between competing rights. If you transplant the same idea, for which Michael gave exactly the answer between the internal and external manifestations of freedom of belief, if you go to the religious sphere as well, the same idea I said at the beginning to Bavia, it's that you have beliefs, but in the same of your beliefs, you should respect the right of others to have their other beliefs as well. And then the balancing act, and here comes the positive reading of a balancing act, can become an optimizing act in a way. How to enhance your freedom without infringing on the other, and how to respect his without sacrificing yours. Let me give you a parallel from the current situation that we all live with COVID-19. There are some countries, without naming them, who started this, what you call the balancing act, by limiting access of so many spaces to only people who are vaccinated. So if you have the belief, religious or scientific or whatever, that you do not want to be vaccinated, that's perfectly fine, but you cannot be in places where you can become a danger for others. So both in the religious sphere and the human rights sphere, it's an issue of balancing or optimizing rights at both sides. At extreme and exceptional cases, the state needs to interfere and really legislate or impose. But in most cases, you don't need to reach that point ultimately. If people have this opportunity to talk about the pros and cons of ensuring respect for different beliefs. Rights can be in tension and in opposition. So it's not only between religions and rights, it's even among human rights themselves, like right to privacy, like to information, and versus the requirement of national security. Again, there are measures that try to optimize both sets of rights. And human rights is about this constant arbitration, optimization or balancing.
And perhaps just to add a concrete example from Switzerland, where this question has actually been also even legislated. So specific areas, including places of worship, so churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, they cannot be restricted and only to those people who are either vaccinated or immune, I mean, to have basically a COVID passport. Because the argument goes, you need to be able also to manifest your religion or belief, And you can minimize, for example, the risks by showing a COVID test showing that you're not contagious now, or you can have a mask and hygienical precautions, which basically then try to prevent a spread in these places of worship, which is obviously desirable. But it's not possible, unlike, for example, in a cinema, to basically say, all right, you need this COVID passport in order to get access to this place of worship. So I think that showcases Ibrahim's point that there's even a distinction between the areas in society and the rights and fundamental freedoms concerned. Do we have any further hands? I see one from Bavia, but perhaps that's an old hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not able to lower my hand. I'm really sorry.
All right. Anyone else? If that's not the case, I would suggest the following to basically give you as a final a farewell electronically, virtually, to have an artistic reflection, an audiovisual journey through the 18 commitments on faith for rights. Just in a nutshell, it's also something that we have been testing and piloting with the Faith for Rights Toolkit to see how different art forms, music, dance, videos, rap, whatever, how the human rights messages and also the faith messages behind the toolkit can be also conveyed in different languages, in different forms, in different artistic ways. So we would suggest to basically say goodbye in this artistic manner, and I hope that also the video showing will work technically. And there you can listen to one of the commitments on gender equality, and you will listen also to different languages. So you have not only English, but also French and Arabic and Hebrew and Sikh and different inspirations and religious texts, not only from the Bible or the Quran or Talmud, or but also from Baha'i and Sikh scriptures, and also from the joint general comment by the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women and of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. So in that sense, it's a nice fusion of the faith and legal texts coming together in a improvised and also remotely recorded way. So with that, Ibrahim and myself say thank you, and we will just show this 5-minute video, and I hope that it will work when I share the screen.
We commit to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality, particularly regarding harmful stereotypes and practices or gender-based violence. We pledge to ensure non-discrimination and gender equality in implementing this declaration on faith for rights. We specifically commit to revisit each within our respective areas of focus, those religious understandings and interpretations that appear to perpetuate gender inequality, harmful stereotypes, or even condone gender-based violence. We pledge to ensure justice and equal worth of everyone, as well as to affirm the right of all women, girls, and boys not to be subjected to any form of discrimination and violence.
Globale de renforcement des capacités devrait cibler les dirigeants influents. Notamment les chefs traditionnels et religieux.
गुरु ग्रंथ साहिब जी पंड जमिए पंड निमिए पंड मंगन व्याहो पंडो हुए दोस्ती पंडो चले राहो पंड बुआ पंड पालिए पंड हुए बंधान सो क्यों मंदा आखिए जित जम्मे राजा पंडो ही पंड उपजे पंडे बाग न कोई नानक पंडे बाहरा इको साजा सोए.
The world of humanity is possessed of two wings, the male and the female. So long as these two wings are not equivalent in strength, the bird will not fly. Until womankind reaches the same degree as man, until she enjoys the same arenal activity, extraordinary attainment for humanity will not be realized. Abdullah.
This is our pledge. This is our commitment.
So with that, thank you so much for having stayed on, and it was great also for us to learn from you and to pilot and to actually test for the first time this facilitating the facilitation. And we hope that you enjoyed it, and all the very best. Ibrahim, do you want to say anything All right, Eduardo? It doesn't seem to be the case. So all the very best, and we wish you all best luck for the whole moot court competition. And I'm sure you will really like it. I see Frans.
Yeah, he's here.
Good night. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the
all the
intervention.
best, and
Good luck to
see
everyone.
you
Good
Saturday.
night from our side. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.